This is Angela Sofer, and this is my case study over internet use violation threats over the World Wide Web. Category 1, problem identification and analysis. So after reading this case study, what do I know? So I know that this is an affluent high school population of students in a large city, and that parents as a population of these students are professionals, and that these students live in financially secure circumstances. Dr. Forbes is an established principal who has been recognized as Principal of the Year and works hard to hire only the highest quality staff. And Ms. Walker is a second-year teacher who has a serious instructional approach and high expectations of her students. I also know that Dr. Forbes has received numerous phone calls from parents concerning their students' high stress levels in Ms. Walker's class and uncharacteristically low grades. Dr. Forbes has worked with Ms. Walker on ways to reduce student stress and to increase positive interactions with her students, but to this point has not successfully implemented those suggestions. Ms. Walker received an email with a link to a website that had highly suggestive comments and vulgar curse words, including "Who wants Ms. Walker to disappear?" I also know that Ms. Walker called Dr. Forbes after reading the email and seeing the comments on the website to report what had happened, and through that conversation suggested the name of a student that might be responsible. Dr. Forbes advised Ms. Walker not to call the police, though she was concerned that maybe she should, and that they would speak with the student and his friends the next day at school. Dr. Forbes also printed off the email and the webpage and said that he would speak with the district technologist to help determine where the emails had originated. So, with problem identification and analysis, what do I still need to know, or what questions do I have? One question I have is, why did Dr. Forbes feel so certain that the email was just a prank? Ms. Walker seemed very concerned and even considered calling the police, and he was very quick to say that he felt like that it was probably just a prank and not to be worried. Also, why did Dr. Forbes ask Ms. Walker who she thought it might be and quickly determined that he would talk to that student without trying to identify the source of the email first? Also, how much follow-up and support has Dr. Forbes provided with regards to Ms. Walker using his suggestions and strategies to alter her instructional approach? So, after reading this case study and working through the identification and the analysis, I believe the problem to be that in this case, Ms. Walker, who is a fairly new teacher, has upset students and parents in her classroom with her rigorous style and high expectations, and consequently, though Dr. Forbes has tried to make suggestions to address these concerns, someone associated with one of her classes has created a website threatening her and posting vulgar messages about her. So my proposed plan of action, step 1, I would have some initial conversations with appropriate parties. First, I would meet with Ms. Walker first thing that next morning and let her know that I would be handling the investigation from this point, and I would be looking to determine who was responsible for the email. Secondly, I thought that it was important to remind Ms. Walker that she needs to remain professional with her students as well as her peers. I thought that because I don't want her to approach her class in such a way that maybe she has some preconceived notions about who these students are that are involved and treat them any differently. And I also want her to remain professional with her peers and not be chit-chatting and talking about it in the hallways and in the teacher's lounge. And encourage her to remember that it's important not to accuse any one student until there's more information available. I would also contact my immediate supervisor, whether there's somebody directly above me that is in direct supervision of administrators, or if it was my superintendent, to let them know not only about the situation but also what my thinking process was and what my potential action steps were going to be. I would also contact the technology department so that they could begin working on determining the source of the email for me. Step 2 would be my investigation process. I would stay in contact with the technology department as they work to identify the source of the email. And I would make sure that I had all of the necessary hard copies of the email and the web page, as well as my documentation to this point of what has occurred in the conversations that I've had. Also, after receiving the information from the technology department, hopefully they had been able to identify the source of the email, and then I would set up a meeting with that student or students, depending, to gather more information about the incident. So after I had an opportunity to talk with the student or students involved and to hear their side of the story and to gather more information, step 3 would be the actions that I would take. So I would set up a meeting with the parents of the student or students involved in sending the email and creating the web page. The intent of that would be to discuss the seriousness of the incident and to ensure that the students understand that there are alternatives to handling their stress and frustration with a teacher and with a class. We would also discuss the appropriate consequences for the incident as well as my expectations moving forward. Additional actions that I would take after my meeting with the parents and the students, I would have Ms. Walker in to visit with her. My first purpose in that would be to reassure her that I had addressed the incident and that I feel confident about her safety, knowing that that was something that she was worried about. We would then discuss my plan for her moving forward with her classes. I would restate my initial strategies that were offered before, as well as my expectations of her. However, this time I would be putting into place a timeline of implementation, as well as offer her support with that implementation. So category 3, resolving the issues based on promoting the success of all students. The first thing that I did to promote the success of my students was to not jump to conclusions about who was involved based on a gut reaction or hearsay. I waited for the evidence and the information from the technology department before I spoke to any student. Secondly, I spoke to the parents and the students together about the issue at hand. We discussed alternative ways to handle their stress and frustrations, as well as what current and future disciplinary action would entail in an effort to avoid a second offense. And finally, I assured student success by developing a plan with Ms. Walker about her classroom management and instructional practices moving forward. We worked through suggested strategies, developed a timeline to implement those strategies, and I offered her support in her growth towards those goals. Category 4, debrief the problem by reflecting on what you were thinking, feeling, and valuing by identifying issues that are unresolved or open for further investigation. Some things I valued and thought about while determining how to handle this incident. I wanted Ms. Walker to feel comfortable talking to me as well as supported by me. Even though there were things that we could address in order for her to improve as a teacher, I did want her to know up front that I would protect her, support her, and be fair with her. When I was talking with the parents and talking with the students, I wanted her to feel confident in that, and that we would work on any issues that she was having subsequent to the issue at hand. I also wanted the students and the parents to feel as though I was being fair with them by fully investigating the incident prior to making any accusations, and that I listened to the student side of the story. I think it's important in building community with your students and community with your parents that they feel like they can be heard. I also wanted the parents and the students to feel as though I was working together toward a long-term solution and not that I was just handing down a punitive punishment based on an isolated incident or behavior. I wanted them to know that I was being fair, and I wanted the students to understand that even though I listened to their side of the story and maybe even understand, empathize, or can identify with the stress and the frustrations that they were having, that there are going to still be consequences for the decisions that they make. Finally, I think that the critical piece to this issue is the future improvement and support of Ms. Walker. So not only do I want to avoid this issue again with her moving forward, I want her to evolve, learn, and grow as a professional and as a teacher. I want her to understand that we all make mistakes, and being involved in an incident like this is really where we have our opportunity to learn and to grow and to be able to change our practice. And so I want her to understand that she's supported, but that moving forward, we want to avoid this happening again. So, some potential unresolved or open issues. One of the open issues that could arise is if the technology department is unable to determine who sent the email. So if this is the case, then I would have to move forward with student interviews to see if I could determine the source. I would still need to keep in mind being fair and not accusing anyone until I was absolutely sure of who was involved and what the situation was. Another potential issue would be of Ms. Walker's improvement. So it will still be open and ongoing after the issue was resolved. So if she is unable or unwilling to implement the new strategies in her management and instruction, then I would have to consider what steps I would take next in regarding her future employment, or what our next steps would be in her growth plan. And in Category 5, as I reflect on Standard 5, and how I, as a building administrator, would promote the success of all students by acting with integrity, fairness, and in an ethical manner. As a building administrator, I believe that I acted fairly by not jumping to conclusions about who was involved without proper investigation into the issue. I contacted the technology department and waited to hear from them before moving forward with talking to students. As a building administrator, I also believe that I was fair and acted with integrity by working with Ms. Walker in developing a plan for improvement and by giving her an opportunity to grow in a supportive environment. I also tried to support her and make sure that she felt safe and reassured immediately after the incident occurring. And finally, I believe that I was fair and ethical while working with the students and their families. I kept the lines of communication open with them, listened to their side of the story, however, followed through with consequences and expectations. And that concludes my analysis of this case study of internet use violation threats over the World Wide Web.